let's try. I mean this. I will do my best to speak up if I am not loud enough or you miss something for obvious reasons. I'm a pessimist. I do not assume they're done. Okay? Please let me know. Please stop me. Be like, hey man, you know why. And I'm like, okay. You know, and I'll just restate it. Right? Okay. What we're going to do today, we're going to talk about Vonnegut, obviously. If you have not already, go ahead and break that out, whatever form it takes. Big book, small book, some people have the ebook, whatever it is. Go ahead and break that out, you're going to need it. To begin with, we're going to return to the conversation we didn't finish last time because I wanted to talk to you about your papers. That's chapter 5. There's a big conversation we got to have about chapter 5. It is, I think in many ways, one of the most important chapters in the book. Hopefully you've had time to read it at this point. That was my aim with not fully discussing it last time. I want to start in the big book anyway, and again, we'll try to sort out page numbers. In the big book, we're on 149. Try to help us figure out how to get there in the smaller books. Man, it's like knee-deep in chapter 5. It's close-ish to this fun illustration that I'm going to talk about here in a couple minutes. Like it's in the big book anyway. It's probably 5 or 6 pages before that. But again, I know that doesn't help you very much. Some of the language we're going to think about on the page. Billy asks if you know this, and that's like right after a little break. If you happen to be able to find that, my God. It's like a bad movie that I'm stuck in. Yeah, we're deep into 5, so there's... This is how you know, by the way, that no one actually gives a shit about your education. It's not the only way you know, but like, it's a pretty good one. Anyway, okay. And again, if you can't, was anybody able to find this section in the small book for us? I know. All right, I will read slowly and loudly. So Billy is talking to the Tralfamadorians, and like we mentioned last week, pretty much any time they show up, you can bet that they are going to be talking about free will and time and what they think about it, right? They're kind of mouthpieces for that whole point of view, right? Same deal here. And by the way, I actually, for several reasons, I won't maybe read a lot of this. Does anybody remember on this page we find out how the universe ends? Does anybody remember how?
Yeah, it's where they like fill up the UFO, like the fuel, and it goes up
The Tralfamadorians, they're testing out new fuel, and they push the starter, and it blows up the universe. So then Billy asks a pretty obvious question when he gets that information. What does he ask?
Can you stop it?
Yeah, if you know that, like if you, right now, Jalen, if you knew how the universe is going to end and you shared that with us, we would all go, well, you want to, maybe not, right? How do the Tralfamadorians respond?
They say we know it's going to happen, it's always going to happen, we're not going to stop
Can't
it.
change it. Why? I just want to review real quick. Why do the Tralfamadorians say this? Fate. It's destiny. There's no free will. They say something like, he, meaning the Tralfamadorian, has always pressed it. He always will. We always let him, and we always will let him. The moment is structured that way. So here we have, again, this question about fate, free will. Those two concepts cannot coexist. If you buy one, you really can't buy the other, right? Flip side of the coin is true as well. If you think free will is a thing, if you think you make decisions that are yours, you can't believe in fate. They don't work together, okay? Now again, the most interesting aspect of that to me is not that argument comes up, and it's not even the way that Vonnegut explains that argument, because it's pretty easy to get, you know? You believe in one or the other, they don't agree with each other. I've never had a student go, actually, like that's just how those ideas work. Cool. What's interesting to me is it occurs many times in the book. Tralfamadorians come up a lot, especially, as we pointed out last week, for a book that's supposed to be pretty serious, has a pretty serious message. Why do we got this sci-fi BS cropping up all the time? Like, it's weird that he would make that point that often, okay? So he must want us thinking about it for some reason. So mainly I want you thinking about it, especially when it comes to what we're going to talk about next, as best we can. Here on 156, and we're actually going to talk about the page before, but I'm hoping this will be a little easier for you to find. 156 is an illustration. Vonnegut was fond of these in his books. If you can find it in the tiny book, please let us know. 122. If you're in the smaller book, it's on 122. And if you're in the e-book, again, we're actually going to look at the page. Although I don't know if the e-book has the pictures. Kind of missing out. Damn. Okay, well, I'll paint a word picture for you when we get there. Try to give you some language that you can search for. I heard you tell father one time. That's kind of a lot of words, but you can. That's the page we're on. We're on the page previous to this illustration. You just turn it for me. All right. So part of this is going to be uncomfortable, by the way. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. I got evals from last semester. I'm pretty sure somebody was pissed off about what we're about to talk about. Just letting you know. Okay. I'm tamping down rage. I am sorry. I'm so angry. Anyway, we are at Billy and Valencia, his wife. We are at their wedding night in this scene. Okay? And, you know, a lot of it is what people tend to do on their wedding night, right? And I do bring it up for a reason. I want to say that. I don't know if everyone will believe me. But I'm actually going to turn the page one more time. So if you go back one more page. I want to talk about their marriage. And I want to talk about what they're doing here. So on the page previous to this one, you don't have to go there. This will bother some folks. I'm going to read it to you. We come out of a break, and this happens. Billy made a noise like a small rusty hinge. He had just emptied his seminal vesicles into Valencia, had contributed his share of the Green Beret. According to the Tralfamadorians, of course, the Green Beret would have 7 parents in all. And then we talk about the buttons of his spine along the edge of the mattress. We say right after that, he had been rewarded for marrying a girl nobody in his right mind would have married, which is a bummer. I'm going to ask, and again, I understand it's not fun. I don't think it's meant to be. Talk to me about the way, we're talking about Billy here in the big book on 151. Again, you don't have to go there necessarily. Billy made a noise like a small rusty hinge. He had just emptied his seminal vesicles into Valencia, contributed his share of the Green Beret, who's going to be their son. We could start here. What is literally happening in this book? Okay, they are doing that. They are. But even that, I mean, I don't mind. Again, some people don't like the word, but I don't really care. That tone is very different from the tone we get in this scene, right? How so? I just want to talk about that for a second. Because whether you like that word or not, you understand what he's saying. You probably heard that more than made a noise like a small rusty hinge, emptied his seminal vesicles, contributed his share of the Green Beret. Like that to me, I would guess, is probably the first time you've ever heard it put quite like that.
Sounds a lot like machine-like.
It's a little boring. It's machine-like. We have medical language as well. Like it's, it doesn't feel like what is going. I don't want to lead you too much. What's different about the way?
It's like procreation, not like making love.
Good. Well, again, that you're hitting upon the tonal difference.
It doesn't seem enjoyable.
It doesn't seem like much of anything.
It's like animal, you know how.
Well, in the way that we wouldn't be invested.
going through the motions,
Yeah. So there's no heat or passion or emotion whatsoever, right? For sure. Somebody said something.
I said he's just rowing the boat.
Okay. Yeah, in a way. Now, you guys have hit upon one way to think about this, so we'll talk about that now. Specifically with Billy, you said he's just rowing the boat. What do we mean by that? What's one argument that gets kind of implied here about Billy? We state it outright here in a second, but just in this moment, I think we're implying something about potentially how he sees this interaction. Like Billy would never say, "Yeah, we're fucking." Like that's not what this is. How do we read Billy in this moment, given the description?
Well, it's not like for joy, it's like for just greeting people.
Well, there's a logical conclusion to the activity they're participating in, which is a kid. Now it's fun that it says it's gonna be a Green Beret. That sounds a little bit like fate, you know. But yeah, it doesn't. I mean, again, we said it pretty well. It just kind of sounds like he's going through the motions. He's rowing the boat, as it were. He's not emotionally invested. This is his wife. This is his wedding night, right? Shouldn't he? You would think.
He doesn't even like her.
I know. What is that about?
Her dad's rich.
Do you now? We got to be careful here. Let's talk about this for a second. You're not wrong, in a sense, but do you get the idea that Billy is a gold digger? That's what this is? No. Yes, ma'am.
I feel like Billy just goes through the motions of life continuously to
Yeah.
where a marriage does not matter to him, just as his life does not matter to him.
Okay.
In a way.
Can you go ahead, man?
Oh, my bad. Is it that he's fine that or he's fine with being settled with mediocre or satisfied? Because even when she says that she's gonna lose weight for him,
Yeah.
he was like, you don't have to. I've seen.
Well, yeah. Let's go. That's the next page. I was gonna. She says, and man, a lot of this is really sad. Like she says here on the top of 153, I never thought anybody would marry me. Billy just says, He doesn't know what to say to that. I'm going to lose weight for you. What? I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to become beautiful for you. I like you just the way you are. Do you really? Really? He had already seen a lot of their marriage, thanks to time travel, knew that it was going to be at least bearable all the way. That's kind of Billy's high bar. Is okay, is bearable. Why? We're learning a lot about Billy on these pages, is why I want to stay with it for just a second. There's a whole other angle to this, by the way, but it kind of comes back to what Brianna said. We can parse that a bit more. Something to the effect of, the way he approaches his marriage is basically the way he approaches his life, right? What did you mean by that?
Like, kind of like whenever he was left in the trenches because he didn't want to go on.
Yeah.
So it's just that he doesn't place his life in importance. I feel like it's not,
No, okay, well, no, that's we can think about that. Like, I think what you're trying to say, and this is kind of how I'm trying to use this moment. All of our lives, most of the time, are kind of drudgery, right? And people take that as a negative, but that's just every day. Your life can't be fireworks all the time. LeBron James probably has a really sweet life, but he also just gets up in the morning and sometimes his back hurts. He's like, sorry. It's not most of it is kind of whatever, and there's exclamation points. Wedding night, I think for most people, would be an exclamation point, right? For all kinds of reasons. Not just the sex stuff, but you're an adult now. It's weird. I got married. I'm gonna tell you what, it was weird. It was weird. Fucking weird. To go, life, huh? All right. You don't get that from Billy, though. At no point. He's just it's gonna be bearable. Why do you think he feels that way?
Because he already knows what's going to happen.
That's part of it. But why?
Everything's controlled by fate. Why matter? Why does
So,
it matter?
okay, good. So what we're basically saying here is, and he says as much, He says as much later. I believe it's later because the book is all over the place. He comes to agree with the Tralfamadorian mindset, right? Particularly because he does time travel. Well, we got to be clear. He doesn't really time travel. He gets thrown around in time, right? He doesn't control it. But because he can see all this, it kind of says to him, oh, fate must be real because I'm just getting pushed around everywhere, right? Yeah.
It has something to do. You remember when they told him it's like don't focus on the bad things, just focus on the.
We're going to talk about that in a second, actually. But what about that? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, you're fine. That was the question.
I didn't hear it because I cut you off. I'm sorry.
Does his mentality have something to do with when they told him that?
I believe it does. Okay, we got more to say before we can get there, but yes.
Sorry for jumping again.
Yeah, that's okay. You're just time traveling a bit. But so what we're, to put it another way, when you look at Billy, he has been considered by many to be one of the worst main characters in modern American literature. He sucks. Like as a person, he's not fun. He's not interesting. What his life is interesting, but him as a person. There are moments where he's interesting. I'm not trying to push back too hard. Do you have any in particular? Because there's a couple I'm thinking of.
Plane crash.
That's his life though. That's not him. I'm just saying crazy shit happens to him for sure. But as a dude, like, would you want to go get a beer with Billy or something? Like, not really. But if you asked him, he'd go, okay. Right? He's apathetic, as I mentioned before. The most interesting moments, by the way, are when he cries. But maybe that says something about me. I don't know. Anyway, my point here is, I think what we get with Billy, especially because we keep drumming up the Tralfamadorians, we get to see, I think, maybe what it would actually look like to live that way. You see what I'm saying? So again, some of you may, or you may know somebody in your life who confesses like that they really believe in fate or destiny or whatever, okay? Billy does. Billy means that. He lives that way. And the argument in the book, at least, is this is what that looks like. If fate is real and you embrace it fully, then yeah, who gives a shit about your wedding night? Or your marriage? It's going to be bearable. Not much I could do about it anyway, but it's going to be fine. He also tells her not to worry about losing the weight because according to him, she's not going to anyway. Because she's not fated to, right? None of it matters. When you take free will out of the equation, it seems like you also take human emotion out of the equation. When you do that, I mean, at a certain point, are you even a person? Or are you a machine? With seminal vesicles and whatnot. Okay. There's another way to think about that scene, but we actually spent a good bit of time on it. I'm going to move on. But it's all got a lot to do with the Tralfamadorians. I'm just going to say that. I want to skip it. I'm going to turn the page. All right. Turn it again because I fucked up. All right. So now we're still at their wedding night. They have done that thing. We're past it. And, well, two bits I want to concentrate on. First, and this is just kind of set up, some people sail past who we're going to meet later, which is fun. This book is fun like that. Rumford sails past. If you got into him already, he's a fun character. But anyway, it was a simple-minded thing to do for a female earthling. It was a simple-minded thing for a female earthling to do, to associate sex and glamour with war. Because once they sail past, they have just had the sex. She starts asking him about war. She says, "Do you ever think about it?" He says, "Sometimes." Valencia says, "I look at you sometimes, I get a funny feeling that you're just full of secrets. I'm not." This was a lie, of course. He hadn't told anybody about all the time traveling, about the aliens. "You must have secrets about the war. Or not secrets, I guess, but things you don't want to talk about." Billy says no. He just says no. "I'm proud you were a soldier. Do you know that?" Billy says good. Was it awful? Billy says sometimes. A crazy thought now occurred to Billy. This is the part I want to talk about. The truth of it startled him. It would make a good epitaph for Billy Pilgrim and for me too. Who's the me in that situation?
The narrator.
The narrator. And he doesn't even say what it is. And it's weird. Maybe there's a line in the ebook, I don't know. But he doesn't say what it is. He just gives you the picture on the next page.
I read that probably 5 times. I thought I missed something.
Yeah, and it's almost like a reveal. You're like, oh. An epitaph, by the way, is what gets carved on your tombstone. So that's what this is. Billy, in this moment where his new wife is telling him, I'm proud you were a soldier. Was it awful? She's like kind of prodding him, like, tell me something about it, basically. And he's kind of trying to shut it down, which he doesn't usually do, right? So that's interesting. Amid all that, he has this flash, and he realizes what he wants on his tombstone. That's a pretty deep thought to have. It's not one I've ever had. I imagine most of you aren't sitting here like, that'll work, and you just write down what's going to fucking go on your tombstone. So we got to talk about this too. The line is on the tombstone, everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. This is the most probably famous line from the book, probably Vonnegut's most famous line ever. There are people walking around with this tattooed on their bodies right now. So, let's start here. What is an epitaph? Like, other than it goes on your tombstone.
It says something about you as a person. It's like the memory of loving father, all that stuff.
It's usually a very small space, and it's kind of meant to sum you up, right? In some way. An obituary does that, but obituaries usually got much more room. So yeah, loving father, loved, trains, like, what are your 5 things? Like your 5, because that's all we got. Your 5 big things. We're going to write them here for eternity, essentially. And so anybody who happens by, they see that, and that's what they know of you, is that. So it got some real weight to it. So let's talk about this. Billy says it would be perfect for him. Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. Well, we've read enough of Billy's life. We haven't seen quite all of it yet if you haven't finished the book, but you've seen a good bit. If you're caught up, I'm almost positive we should have made it to Dresden by now, right? Not super great there all the time. How can he say everything was beautiful when we clearly know that's not the case?
The stuff he seen was different.
What do you mean?
Like, I'm trying
But he's seen terrible things.
not.
He cries when he's alone in the dark. That doesn't seem.
With the aliens, like.
I'm not saying he hasn't seen a lot of cool stuff, but I'm saying, like, to borrow his language, it doesn't feel accurate to say everything was. Like, that suggests he saw nothing that wasn't beautiful. That's what that means, right? How could he say that? And at least the way I read it in that moment, I think he means it. But how could he say what we know is obviously a lie and mean it? Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt, right? You brought this up before, if you remember, with the Tralfamadorian advice. Do you recall?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say it for us now?
I said, just focus on the good, don't focus on the bad.
Yeah, it's when he's at the zoo, because he's in a human zoo at one point. You remember, again, from your World War II social studies units, the human zoos we had on, yeah. But he's there, and he's like, you guys never have war. Tell me the secret. You know, that whole moment. Tralfamadorian are like, no, we have wars. We just don't pay attention to them because they're ugly and awful. Look at this afternoon, it's lovely. Let's just focus on that. Don't look at the awful things. Yeah? Again, if you can do that and really commit, then maybe everything is beautiful, right? You don't see the ugly stuff. You live through it, but you don't It doesn't affect you. It doesn't get to you. Although, again, he does cry in the dark when he's alone. But he never admits, even to himself, these ugly events, right? Okay. Now, I guess we would read, and nothing hurt the same way. Is that fair? Everything is beautiful and nothing hurt. I think he means it. But I think it comes down to that Tralfamadorian advice and him believing it. And again, what's interesting there, I told you already, probably too many times, every time the Tralfamadorians come up, in some way, it's tied to this question of fate and free will. If that's their advice, I mean, it kind of seems like that's a way to live with fate, right? If you don't have a say in anything, well, you might as well try to dress it up, try to not see the bad stuff, right? That makes sense for Billy, right? But what I'm more interested in, the narrator, in one of his little moments where he likes to remind you he's here, he goes, and for me too. That'd be great for me. That's weird. Again, that's the equivalent of you, for some reason, walking through a graveyard, seeing an epitaph and going, I'm gonna steal that one. I'm gonna use that one. Why is that strange?
Because he's gonna be cutting to the finish line.
What do you mean?
He's like, I'm gonna die at some point. I'll put this on my tombstone.
Nah, we all know that. You guys don't think about it as much because you're younger and full of life and you're not tired when you wake up, but like it's coming for all of us. No, the reason it's weird, again, is because your epitaph sums you up. It would be strange to go, hey, the thing that worked for that guy, that's good enough for me. I'm basically the same person as whoever that was, right? It's weird. My point is it should give you pause. Now, I know it doesn't for most of you because it's very quick. It's very quick. But we got to parse this. If the narrator says it would work for me too, he is, I was going to say suggesting, it's more explicit than that. He's explicitly telling you, you could sum me up the same way you could sum up Billy. And I want to ask you guys if you buy that. Does that sound right to you, that the narrator is like Billy? Everything we know about Billy, we talked about him a lot, kind of how he carries himself, how he kind of, I guess, floats through life would be one way to think of it, you know, just getting pushed by the currents. Is the narrator like that, do you think? Yeah.
I know you talked about this earlier. Is the narrator the author or no?
He's Vonnegut adjacent.
Okay.
So he's not Vonnegut, but chapters 2 through 9 that we end up reading is basically the book that the narrator is writing in chapter 1, if that makes sense. Are they similar enough to have the same epitaph, do you think? Narrator and Billy.
Doesn't really seem like it.
My gut says no. But why is that? We don't hear about the narrator very much after chapter 1, not until chapter 10. What do we know about him? We only have a little bit of information, but we know some things. What's he doing? What kind of guy is he?
He's writing a book.
He's writing a book.
Yeah, friends.
He's got friends. I don't know if Billy does. Billy knows people. I don't know if he's really got friends. You know? Even just the act of writing a book. At one point in chapter 1, the narrator tells us how many pages he's thrown out. It's like,
5,000, right?
it's a couple thousand. Yeah. That's a lot of pages. You guys bitch about 3 pages. Imagine burning a couple thousand. How do you know that's not something Billy would do? You know this.
He's not that motivated to do something.
No! Anything. For sure.
Like, he said in his past, he was like, no, I confused him. So,
He did what now?
the part where his like daughter came to visit him and like he was like freezing to death. And she's like, oh yeah, your temperature's fine.
He wouldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would have just frozen to death. That's Billy. That's absolutely Billy. Narrator, though, is motivated. Feels strongly, at the very least, about war. We don't know enough about him to know the rest of his life, but we know he gives a damn about this. Billy doesn't Doesn't really give a damn about anything. That seems like a significant difference. So now then, we come to the original question, how could the same epitaph work? That feels odd. If at least in this one fundamental way, they are not the same dude, right? How do you read that? When you, and again, apologies to those of you with the ebook, I'll try to kind of hold it up. But again, it's the whole page. It's a tombstone. He's even got some grass down here. You know, he's about the details. Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt, he says, on that tombstone. What I like to ask students, because you guys always give fun responses. First of all, who's the epitaph for? Who's it for? Yes, I mean any epitaph. Think a little broader than that. Who's an epitaph for? It's not.
Oh, it's for the people reading it.
It's for everybody else. Now, it's about you, but it's not for you. You're not the audience. You're the one person who's not in the audience, right? So this is in some ways a message. And we talked about how it makes total sense for Billy. Absolutely. This is a message the narrator tells us he's going to leave behind for other people. It's going to sum him up somehow. This is the question I enjoy. And again, think about it for just a second. If you're walking through a graveyard, there's good reasons to be there. There's weird reasons to be there. But whatever your reason is, you're walking through a graveyard. And you see this on a tombstone. How do you interpret that message on that tombstone? Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt.
Horseshit.
Why? Why? You said something, I'm sorry.
Because nothing's beautiful and everything is.
Well, but why specifically might you think that when it's on a tombstone?
Because you know that person's probably been through some sort of pain.
How do you know?
It's part of it.
At least one day was pretty rough.
And the human condition just kind of sucks sometimes.
Sure. Well, I mean, we know a lot of this implicitly, but again, I'm thinking, because context is everything. If this was on a wall in front of like an ocean view with flowers, and you'd be like, I get it. It's not. It's not. It's very different. Contextually, it suggests to me, use the word I always come to, is sarcasm. Because it's a grave. It's a joke. It's kind of funny if you take it like that. I think that can sum up the narrator really well. He's the kind of guy with his last act. I would love to do this too. Make some kind of joke on your tombstone. I saw one famously says, I told you I was sick. That's hilarious. That is outstanding, right? And again, some people might balk at that because you should be serious, but maybe that's not whoever the I was sick guy was. Maybe it does sum him up really well to tell that joke, right? In that context. That's outstanding. If that's the case, and I think we have evidence to suggest that it is, that he doesn't mean it like Billy does, that it's sarcastic. Obviously, and some of you said this already, he's indicating the opposite. Not everything is beautiful. Some things do hurt. Okay? And he's kind of putting that in your head when you read it. How else might we argue that that makes sense for the narrator? He wants us to recognize this fact about the world, about life. Not everything is beautiful. Some things do hurt. How do we know he wants us to know this? Again, we don't know a lot about him. Go ahead.
Is that kind of like why he's like writing his book?
Why do you say that?
Because he's writing about like war. War is not pretty and it hurts.
And he wants us to see that. Isn't that Mary's big problem? You'll write one of those books that will get turned into one of those movies that make it look cool. Make it look rad. Even the Avengers, when they destroy a city, it's just fucking awesome. And there's explosions and there's people dying everywhere. All those buildings, people going, no! The whole time. Be a very different movie if every time Hulk smashed, we cut to a family getting smashed. Very different movie. We're not here for that. We want the cool shit. Everything was beautiful. Nothing hurt. He gets back up. He's fine. Yeah. That's what the book is supposed to be, I think. He wants to try to actually have us see it. And that's why it's hard. The message there is, I think we're more like Billy than we realize as a society. I think we usually pay attention to the beautiful stuff. We watch for the commercials, to return to our conversation before class. All that other stuff, that looks hard. I don't want to do that. Yeah. What time is it about? 11:40. Because I've never built this lesson in this way, so I'm a little lost for time. All right. What I want to do right now, I want to shift gears slightly. I did this last time. Nobody, to my memory, took me up on it, but I'm going to try again. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about or ask about, or you have an idea?
We were talking about this, so it goes.
Ah, there you go. All right, that's cool. Let's do that. So it goes. Comes up so many times. And you did mention this last time, I remember now. I haven't Googled it forever. I think it's like 117 times or 119 times, something like that. It's in the book. So it's a lot. There is one point in the book, and I cannot find it right now, although it is written in my notes, but I won't bore you as I search. At one point, he tells you where he gets that phrase. Does anybody remember that?
I remember when they said that, I remember he told them.
It's a Tralfamadorian phrase. It's something they say when what happens.
Somebody dies.
Yes. And so every time in the book, when someone dies, the narrator says, so it goes. It's a Tralfamadorian custom. We've talked a lot about them, just kind of here and there. So you could probably answer this regardless. But again, especially in that context, when someone dies, their response is, so it goes. What does that mean, do you think?
Does that relate back to like fate? Like,
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
like,
Because
like you're gonna die at a certain time, so it goes.
so it goes.
It happens.
What'd you say?
Like it happens.
Shit happens.
Yeah.
Basically, is what that means. Now again, for a second, imagine, and this does happen, unfortunately, but if you came in one day, you're like, hey, I can't come to class, I wanted to just tell you face to face, my dog died this morning, I'm gonna go bed, cry for the rest of the day, and I was like, shit happens. How would you feel about me in that moment?
Just go home.
I'm awful. I'm like, you're like, I didn't know you were the worst. Why?
Because you're being insensitive.
Yeah. Let's get a few more adjectives. That'd be one of them. What else? Callous is the one I would. Yeah. Now, what am I dismissing? What am I being sensitive to?
Or feelings about it.
Your grief.
Just because something happens doesn't mean that it won't hurt.
To us. And again, this is important. I'm going to stop pointing at you. But to us, well, this is aggressive, right? We're not Tralfamadorians, clearly. And the book talks about some key ways that that's true. But we've kind of talked about this already. I just want to make it blatantly apparent. How are we different from Tralfamadorians? When, for them, somebody dies, they say, so it goes. They say, shit happens. You guys rightfully respond with, what? That's not okay. Why?
We grieve.
They already seen it.
Yeah, they're,
Well,
they're like them too.
good. I mean, not good, but you take my point. Yeah. And again, we are not, at least most of us. The people who are, by the way, end up in those podcasts we were talking about. But most of us have to deal with that sort of thing. You got to work through those emotions, right? All of us, even if we haven't felt it, you understand that concept because we're human. That's a fundamental quality to being a human being, is grieving and things like that. Tralfamadorian is not so. And apparently, again, if Billy kind of lives like them, Billy would follow suit. And we see what that looks like with his marriage. He doesn't feel things. Why do we do it so much then? We just talked about the narrator doesn't agree with Billy. He's sarcastic, is how I read that epitaph, right? So why say so it goes like over 100 times? Every time. Even at one point, and I don't know if you guys are there yet, so minor spoiler. At one point, Billy wakes up in the hospital and his water has died. The narrator says so it goes. It's just kind of a weird joke. So it goes. But why do that so much? I thought he didn't feel this way, right? He wants us to see like the horror, the awfulness of war. Why do you think he would do that? So it goes.
Is it to like showcase that like it's a flawed mentality?
Why do you suggest that?
Suggest that it's a flawed mentality.
Well, why do you think that's what he's doing? We got to tease this out. So
I guess to just kind of show that if you want to walk through life like Billy, your life's kind of gonna suck. You're not gonna feel anything. You're not gonna relate to anything.
I could go with you a little bit. Yeah, what's up?
He focuses on the positive.
Billy does.
Yes.
Yeah, very much so.
So every time somebody dies, he just has to
So you could very easily make the case Billy would agree with so it goes. Like he's like, yeah, shit happens. Would the narrator agree with that, given what we said? Probably not. Well, then again, the question remains, why, because the narrator's the one building the book, the one writing the story, why would he keep saying, so it goes?
Probably like, see how fucked up it is that he just keeps saying this.
One really good argument is, at some point as a reader, the hope would be, about 2 or 3 times of that, you'd go, what? So it goes? Bro, what are you talking about? Yeah. Now again, what's interesting, of course, given my experience, these are not shots fired. This is just what you guys have told me in the past. You guys fly right past those. How many pages do I have to read for this fucking class? So it goes, fine. And but one argument is those are meant to be moments where you as a reader, as a human, stop and go, no, it does not. That's not cool. But that's a slightly different conversation. But yes, I think the same way we talk about the epitaph, it's sarcastic, it's meant to say something other than what it literally says. I think So It Goes does the same thing. And it's gonna do it throughout the book. It's gonna do it a lot. That also tells you what? If it happens, again, I'm butchering the number, but it's like 119 times or something. If it happens that many times, what does it tell you about the book? It's a lot of death. You can even, there's a body count in this book because we have that phrase. Yeah. That's interesting. In a book about war. Again, if an Avengers movie, as the credits roll, before you get to the director or the cast, it's just like 20,000 people dead. You know, you change the movie at least a little bit. You know, you wait for the post-credit scene, and it's just a lot of graves.
Aren't you expecting people to die? Aren't you expecting people to die?
You are. But again, isn't that a weird thing to just expect and be cool with?
It's a war book.
I know. Look, part of what we're kind of getting into here, I think, is a part of the conversation Vonnegut and or the narrator would want us to investigate. What I mean is, isn't it strange that I think all of us I agree. I think all of us agree with what you're saying. The point is, I think the narrator wants to shake us out of just accepting that.
Oh, why is there no emotion?
No, why is there war?
Oh.
Well, okay, in the first chapter, the guy tells the narrator, you might as well write an anti-glacier book. You know, you're not getting rid of war. And I mean, sure. But even saying that, even going, I mean, yeah, he's probably right. Doesn't that mean we're just going to have more war? We're going to have more death? Narrator wants to try to stop that. The question would be, how could you even attempt that? You'd have to get us on some level to go, man, there's a lot of death in this book. That's really fucked up. Instead, we all go, Yeah, it's a war book. That's how they work. He doesn't want us to shrug, right? But everything in our lives, the narrative we have about war, which we get from these days movies, because you guys don't read, again, no shots, this is the truth, is exactly what Mary's worried about. We just go, yeah, death. Again, we're much more, I think, like Billy than we're willing to admit a lot of the time. That's what So It Goes is doing. The other thing we can talk about in that regard, yeah, we got time. I want to talk about pillars of salt. This is early in the book, super early, into chapter 1, actually. In the big book, it's on 27, 28. In the little book, again, it's the last 2 pages of chapter 1. If you're looking for it in an e-copy, you can probably find it if you just search for Gideon Bible, Gideon Bible. Those are put in lots of hotel rooms. I don't know if they still are. I haven't stayed in a hotel in a very long time. All right. So obviously, I assume I'm not surprising anyone at this point. This book is strange. Yeah. But what's cool about a book like this, a lot of books in the 60s were doing this, the good ones anyway. It's strange, but in a purposeful way, usually. So what can kind of happen, though, especially with you guys, for reasons that, to be fair to you, are totally acceptable, you can breeze right past this stuff. Because it's just like, well, that's another weird fucking thing, and you just move on to something else, right? So I want to stop for a second here. At the end of chapter 1, did we find it in the small book?
The Gideon Bible?
Yeah.
It's 21.
21. So 21 and 22, probably. This happens. We're with the narrator now. We have not met Billy, right? Narrator, he's in a hotel. He says, I looked through the Gideon Bible in my motel room for tales of great destruction. First of all, we can stop right there. Why is he looking for tales of great destruction?
Inspiration.
Kind of, yeah. How did they handle it? People have been reading this for a couple thousand years. It's got some staying power to it. Yeah. This is what he lights upon. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar, I read. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities, and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground. So it goes. Those were vile people in both those cities, as is well known. The world was better off without them. We got to stop here for just a second. What story is he reading?
Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah. Does everybody know this story?
Yeah.
Not everybody, well, but does anybody not? Okay. I went to a religious preschool, which is a very strange place to go.
Yeah.
Sodom and Gomorrah, famously debauched. In some versions you'll read, because there are different versions now, these people were like super vile, criminal. At one point in the story, Sodom and Gomorrah, God sends angels to talk to them, basically say, hey guys, we're going to fuck you up unless you cut it out. And I know people don't like that language, but that's basically what he says. They try to rape that angel. So these were not good people, as the narrator tells us. Famously in the story, God goes, hellfire. Burns them to the ground. Nobody survives. Except for a guy named Lot and his wife. But his wife doesn't make it out. This happens. And Lot's wife, of course, was told not to look back. She was. God said you can't look back at it. Where all those people and their homes had been. But she did look back, and I love her for that, because it was so human. So she was turned to a pillar of salt. So it goes. We're going to talk about that for a second. Lot and Lot's wife make it out. God in the story tells them they can't look back. And it seems like he means business, given what has just occurred. Seems like it's pretty serious about all this stuff. But she does. And I have two questions about that. Number one, why? Given everything that just occurred, if somebody was who was able to do that was like, yeah, don't look back. The obvious decision would be, okay, I won't. But then she does, and the narrator says he loves her for that because it was so human. Why does she look back? I think that'll help us with the second question.
Other humans just died.
Huh?
Other humans died.
Yeah, but they were terrible people. They tried to rape angels. That's rough, dude. I'm just challenging you a little bit.
It's like natural.
Are they coming in? Oh. Hey.
Bye.
Hey, buddy.
Bye.
Do you
I love
bring
you.
lunch?
I'm leaving after this.
Okay, cool.
Love you.
I love you, buddy. He's not always that sweet. Yeah, he's great, but he's not always that sweet. Anyway, where were we?
Like, they were still people. Like, she just seen them die.
Okay. Well, and that would be in line a little bit with what we've said in the narrator, right? You want to recognize those people, those human beings. Maybe. Why else? There's a deeper reason. That's part of it. That is part of it. But there's more to her reason. Why do you think she would look back at the, and again, you want to think about the description we get. The narrator says, and Lot's wife, of course, was told not to look back where all those people and their homes had been, but she did look back, and I love her for that because it was so human. So all those people and their homes had been is where she looks. What is she looking back at? I mean, yeah, destruction, like, but that's not what she's looking back at, right? Like, what is she looking back
Where
at?
these people used to live, like their families and stuff?
Do I know?
Where these people used to live with like their families and stuff?
Yeah, that we're very close to what she's looking back at.
Where she was.
Yeah. Let's think about this for a moment. This is Old Testament. Sodom and Gomorrah, she lived there. Ostensibly, if not in the city, then at least the area for her whole life. She's not going to jump in a minivan and like take a road trip. Like, this is her entire world. And those people, for as awful as they might have been, were her whole world. And it was just wiped out. So when she looks back, what she sees is destruction, right? But what she's looking back on, if you understand the difference, is what was taken away. I hate those people. What was once there is what she's looking back at. Now, again, the question would be, why? He says that's so human to do that. Part of it, as we've covered, is the emotion that she must be feeling, right? For sure, for sure. I think there's another reason, though. She looks back on it. And again, I think that discrepancy matters. It's not what she sees, it's what she's turning around. Wave to me. My 6-year-old will get excited about that. Be an adult. Anyway, I wouldn't look back if they were vaporized. I wouldn't. Why does she look back? On the world she was in, right? The people that she knew. What's the function of looking back? He says it's human, so he's saying we would all do that. Right? I'll help you out a little bit. Right after this, he says, people aren't supposed to look back. I'm certainly not going to do it anymore. I've finished my war book now. The next one I write is going to be fun. This one is a failure and had to be, since it was written by a pillar of salt. So he's telling you here at the end of chapter 1, writing the book did to him what was done to Lot's wife, right? He's a pillar of salt too. He has looked back at destruction. But again, that's what he sees. That's not what he's looking back on. Does that make sense? Most of the book is not about Dresden, right? Most of you, I imagine, you're like, where's the bombing? It hasn't happened. It damn near doesn't, by the way. You got to read the whole book to get to it. So that's not what we're really looking back at, if you take my meaning. Why does she look back? Why does he look back? Do you think?
Is it like a coping thing?
What do you mean by that?
Like, I guess like by confronting about that messed up shit, you can like kind of move on from it.
He calls himself a pillar of salt, and quite literally in the story for Lot's wife, she ain't moving on from anything. You can go visit her actually. I forget what country it is. It's in the Middle East somewhere, but there's a famous pillar of salt. They're like, that's Lot's wife. She fucked up. Because the moral of that story, by the way, is what? Like if anybody went to Sunday school or a religious preschool, or there's a moral to that original story. Does anybody know it?
Obey God.
Obey. That's the moral. The narrative tells you a couple sentences later he's not done that, right? So again, I think in the way that he talks about Billy, I think he disagrees. His hero of the story is Lot's wife for looking back, for taking that damage. We can all at least agree with that. If it turns you into a pillar of salt, it's destroyed you. That's what that means. And he says that's what's happened. Writing this book has destroyed him in some way. So then why do it? Coping ain't it.
Because it's an important thing somebody has to do.
Maybe so. Why?
When you're feeling goodbye.
Maybe. I mean, that's part of it. In the way that, because we have language now that I think sometimes muddies the waters. Like what's on the tip of our tongues right now, just because I want to be clear with what I'm trying to say, is like this idea of closure, right? But all that means is you're done with it. You wash your hands of it. I don't know, again, with him saying he's a pillar of salt, that we can say, like he can do one of these, right? Like I don't know if goodbye is the right language, but I think it's in the right ballpark.
See you later.
Deuces. No, I mean, it's because again, that tells me there's like a severing of a relationship where, let's go back to Lot's wife, because that's a little simpler. Kind of. Why does she look back? She's told not to. And everything in the situation has told her, it's probably a good idea not to, right? Why does she do it anyway?
Because she needed those people.
But again, if you had a dude in the sky who was like, I'll fuck you up, and to do it anyway.
Maybe she can't believe it.
Is it what she's used to?
That's part of it. And there is part of that. And that is a human thing to go, yeah, but maybe. You know, I mean, yeah, that's part of it. What did you say, by the way?
Maybe she can't believe it. Like it just happened. Or
We could stay there for a second. What do you mean by that?
like everybody just got burned.
Yeah.
Around, and then you get to walk away.
It almost doesn't seem real.
Yeah.
Why? Why couldn't that have happened? You know, in the out of water. Again, to tie it back to the narrator, because he's making a pretty obvious comparison here. Why would he say he lived through it? And again, Vonnegut lived through the firebombing of Dresden. He was at the Battle of the Bulge. He saw shit we can't even imagine. He did do that. Why might he, in his quiet moments, say to himself, it couldn't have been like that, you know?
Because it's so like fucked up.
It's just so outside of like what seems plausible or possible, right?
Puts you in
And
denial.
do I know?
Like it kind of puts you in denial. Like
It can.
Like,
Well, because it's so insane, right?
destruction rained down from the sky. No way.
Not like that. Yeah. Like dudes get hit by lightning occasionally, that sucks. But like that happens. But like this, yeah, that's part of it. I think is what you're getting at. Is it just seems so impossible that this could occur. You want to confirm it? Sure. I think there's more to it still though. God help us, we got about 10 minutes. I think we can do it. This part always takes a little while, by the way, but it's important.
Why does he say it's a failure?
Why does he say that? He says it's a failure and it had to be because it was written by a pillar of salt. He gives us a reason. He's like, I made salt, man. Salt can't write books. I'll put the question to you guys. We haven't finished it yet. Do you think the book is a failure? Some of you say no. I feel like some of you aren't being honest with me. But go ahead. Why do you say no then? I'm interested to hear.
I think yes, because Mary
Uh,
didn't want it to be like, what's the word?
like entertaining?
Yeah, and there's aliens and stuff in it, and
Are they entertaining?
I think
I saw your face scrunch up. I'm not sure you're sure.
For me personally,
Yeah.
it does a successful job of making me still interested in it, even though a lot of it doesn't make direct sense.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
When you say successful, you mean like getting his message across?
Well, we got to ask that question. He says it's a failure. He says that.
We've had more wars since it came out.
We've had a ton. Yeah.
is that why?
It could be. It could be. He claims he wants to stop him, and if that's true, he didn't. That didn't work out for him. But to be fair, I do think he gets a message across. But here again, we talked about this maybe, I don't know, whenever it was. We talked about it in this class. I feel bad because that's angled up and I'm under the screen. Like they're just looking at the screen. I am sorry, guys. I'm comfortable like this. The point is, I do think you get the message. I agree. What was interesting though, earlier, I believe it was you said something about, well, of course people die. And then I looked out and a lot of you were like, yeah, idiot. It's a war. And it's like, well, if we get his message, but we don't get his message, like it doesn't affect us really, can we say it's a success? And it's like, maybe not. Maybe, but not enough, right? To really do anything. I love this book. I mean, it sounds like I'm like shitting on. I'm not. I love this book. Probably too much, okay? But it's interesting that he calls it a failure, and it's interesting that he says it's because it was written by a pillar of salt. It's because it was written by a person who's like obliterated by looking back on this knowledge that he has, this event, right? Why do we look back on stuff?
Trying to learn from it.
curiosity.
We said that, and again, some of these are true for sure, but I think there's a bigger reason. It's again more fundamental. Why does anybody? And again, the only two examples we have are the narrator and Lot's wife. So whichever one makes more sense for you, because he gives us both. I think Lot's wife, the story is a little simpler, so it could be easier to parse. Why did she look back on them on the Sodom and Gomorrah? They're leaving. They made it out. They survived. And God's like, by the way, don't look. And she does. Why does she do that? Why do we look back on things that are painful? She knows it's not going to be pretty, right? It's not going to be her favorite memory. So she's already not doing what Billy does, right? We can confirm that. That's interesting. But why does she look back when God tells her not to? Kind of like a Tralfamadorian.
Like trying to find the good in the bad.
No.
I guess it was just her fate.
That's what a Tralfamadorian would say. What happened?
Do you want the real answer why she looked back to the actual thing?
I don't know that the narrator would agree with that, but you can go ahead.
Well, like she was married to her daughter married people that also lived there.
Yeah. Well, we talked about how in some ways, like she knew all, that was her world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and again, that is part of it. That's absolutely part of it. But that's also part of why this would, I think anyone would argue, this would devastate her. To see it, right? To know it is one thing, but to see it is a step above that, right? So still, the question would be, why look back and see it? When you know, best case scenario, it's going to wreck your week, right? What's the function? He says it's human. So the narrator arguing to us, it's a human thing to look back.
It's like, what if somebody's okay?
No, it's just like to confirm.
Part of When we talked about that, and again, that's part of it. That's part of it.
You tell somebody not to do something, they're instinctive reactions to do it.
That's part of it too. As human beings, we're a lot alike.
If you tell somebody
Fuck
not,
you, I'm gonna do.
like, hey, don't move. Look.
Isn't that
It's
kind
a
of
thing.
isn't that a suggestion of free will for the orchestrator of the universe to go, don't do this, and for her to go, I'm gonna do it. That's part of it. There's like rebellious streak, for sure. But again, we have to consider the narrator in this. People are telling him not to do it because they say it's a waste of time. But no one is saying, well, don't do it because it'll destroy you, right? Like, that's not really on the table. And it ends up being the case for him. So there's something else that ties these two together. Why is he writing the book? That's all we're really asking. Right? It's to stop war, but he tells us that's not real. He knows that's not going to happen. Why is he writing the book? Why is he looking back?
Is it for him?
It's got to be in some way, yeah. Why? Why do we look? He calls it looking back, right? Why do we do that? Worst thing that ever happened to you, right? Like, why look back at it? Wouldn't it be nicer, Tralfamadorian advice, to ignore it? Don't look at that.
It makes it a little bit easier. It never goes away, but you kind of understand it a little better, which somewhat makes your process of grieving a little bit easier.
It can. Huh?
Does it repeat itself?
I mean, maybe, but again, to the earlier point, we're repeating that one a whole bunch. We'll bomb the shit out of people probably right now, We got really cool ways of doing it too. You just get on an Xbox controller and just unload on folks. I know we're running out of time.
12:11.
I appreciate it. I think, and I'm going to say I think, because it is a theory, right? I think Lot's wife also looks back. The narrator also looks back. For all the reasons you guys gave, again, I mean it. I agree with those. But I think it's also, it's almost like somebody's got to acknowledge it, if that makes sense. And I weirdly think that's a human thing to do, right? So it's sort of like confirming it, but I think at least when a lot of you guys were saying it, it was like, make sure it happened. This isn't that. This is acknowledging what was lost, like who was lost, If nobody looks back, if everybody's a Billy about it, eventually we do forget. Eventually, there's a plaque somewhere nobody gives a shit about. There are people right now, they had to put a stop to this. There were people that would go to a really famous Holocaust memorial in Germany and like pose for selfies with the fucking millions of Jews. Like they would. So people forget. People do. It does kind of go over people's heads. This is a real thing. I think what the narrator is trying to say is it destroyed him to look at this. It was awful to look at this. But he had to, not just for what he's trying to do with the book, but for himself. And I think that that's a human thing. To honor that loss, if that makes sense. Not celebrate it, but again, there's something in us that goes, I have to acknowledge that those people are gone. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
I think that's also why Lot's wife does it. He says he loves her for that. And the weird thing is, if you think about her like that, and you read that story, I don't think the narrator's a fan of the Old Testament. I think he thinks that's pretty fucked up.
Then again, like, New Testament, like, erases all that.
Weirdly, but we put them in the same book. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But the narrator takes a little bit of issue with that, right? Comes up a lot in the book as well. And obviously, we don't have time to talk about that today. All right. For next time, it's more Vonnegut. I forget the chapters. I have them written down, but God knows where that is. I didn't write the numbers because I'm an ass. I think it's the rest of the book.
8 through 9, I think.
I think it's 8 through 10. But again, hey, you'll be all right. Read as much as you can. Pace yourselves. Some of you are still crazy. I know some of you are out there going, I'll just wait until Wednesday night. Why would you do that to yourself? Why would you do that? Don't be that guy. All right. I'll see you guys then. Thank you.